Good morning. The subject that we're going to deal with, especially in the middle of the parshas of Trumat Tzava, Yaakov Pekude, and so on, the Mishkan, the parallel for the Mishkan in the when they were Miyashiv Eretz Yisrael was the Beis Hamikdash. And what I would like to point out is that in the Beis Hamikdash there were a number of very strange things happened, and lahavdil in relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity, there are also some very strange things, and I think you might find this quite fascinating, that the parallels between those unusual things that took place in the Beis Hamikdash and those things that appear in the relativity theory, which is generally accepted today, seem to be strikingly parallel. Okay, that's basically in a not a nutshell, but in a little bit of arichas, what we're going to deal with. Now, the structure, what I'd like to do is follows. First of all, I'm going to ask a number of questions to do with the Beis Hamikdash, which are pretty much parallel to the Mishkan, but it is slightly clearer to us with the Beis Hamikdash. A number of questions. Some are actually questions. Some are just drawing your attention to, it's not a kasha, it's not a difficulty, just to draw your attention. There are 6 altogether. Then I would like to give a little bit of understanding of basic relativity. If you know all about it anyway, please don't be insulted by me giving you some basic information. And when we've done that, we'll try to go back to the questions and see if we maybe understand what the function in the Beis Hamikdash of various things. It wasn't only the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash, of course, has the highest kedusha as a mokom, but of course the Torah itself has got exceptional kedusha, and we'll see. So let's start with the questions. Question number 1. There's a Gemara in Zvachim, Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, and the Rambam paskins like this, that Ein Lina Barosh Hashem Mizbeach. What does it mean? There is no lina, there's no time passes on the top of the Mizbeach. Let's just explain what we're talking about. Every korban has a time limit as to when it can be brought, how long it can be brought, how long you can do the avodas, how long it can be eaten, and so on. So Kodesh Kodeshim have got the day and the following night to offer up the korban, to bring the avodah, to do the avodah during the day, and at night you've got one night to burn the emurim, various parts of the behemoth, the chalovim, the fats, and so on. Kodesh Kalim have got 2 days and the intervening night. Now, the Gemara says in Zvachim, there's a machlokas tanoim on this, but one Tana holds that if once you've put the emurim, the fats or the parts of the behemoth that need to be burnt on top of the mizbeach, if you put them on top of the mizbeach, if you haven't yet put them on, and you let a day and a night go by for Kodesh Kodeshim, for example, then you have then this is possible. These emurim are possible, and you just have to burn them outside the Beis Hamikdash. However, if you put them on top of the mizbeach, then they can stay there for years. You'll never have a disqualification of time. Time, kaviyochel, doesn't pass on top of the mizbeach. It's a very strange din. There is machlokes tanoim on this. But the Rambam paskins, and so we seem to hold, the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Psudei Hamikdashim, Gimel, Perek Gimel, Halacha Yud Aleph, the Rambam paskins, and so we generally hold, Ein Linish Berosh Hashem Mizbeach. And it's not really a question I'm asking, but I'm just drawing your attention to a strange thing, that there's no time on top of the Mizbeach. Why? Right. That's the first question, or first ha'ora. Now the next point, and this really is a question, that although it's a machlokas rishonim, there is Gemara in Pesachim, Vav and Beis, which it's also a mechilta in Shemos Tezayin, Perik Tezayin, Pasuk Tes, that there is Ein Muktam Uma'ucha B'Torah. Rashi, in a number of places, such as the ones I've quoted, Rashi says that as a klal Ein Muktam Uma'ucha B'Torah. So, namely, there is not a chronological order to the Torah. Now, that I think really is a question, because the Torah is the work of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu created intelligence. Kadosh Baruch Hu is this infinite intelligence. A child could write a story in a chronological order. After A, the first thing that happened was A, and then B, and then C, and everything is in the Seder of Zman. Yeah, the Torah, not everywhere, but on a number of occasions, Rashi makes it very clear. It's more, as I say, that Ein Muktam Uma'ucha B'Torah. There's no order. There's no before and after in the Torah. So it's not necessarily, although of course much of Torah is very straightforward. You can see something happened, and then after that something else happened, and so on. But in some cases, like when did Yisro come, is written before Kabbalas Torah. But some of the Rishonim are saying, yes, it's true, it's written like that at the beginning of Yisrael, and it's only afterwards, towards the end of Parshas Yisrael, that we have the Kabbalas Torah, the Aseres HaDibros. But it maybe Yisrael came after Kabbalas Torah, but it's written before. It doesn't matter. Ein Muktam Uma'ucha B'Torah. And that is the question: why should the Rebbeinu Shalom write a sefer, a book, which is not in the correct Lufi Seder HaZman? Right. Now the next question, which I think really is a question. This is really extremely strange. There is, everybody knows certain basic midot measurements that we have. A tefach is about 3.6 inches. It's the fist of the person, of course, the hand of a person. It's a tefach, and we have amos, which are hand breadths. And normally, the relationship between an amma and a tefach, the kol Torah kula, is 1 amma equals 6 tefachim. The same as one in imperial measurements in English. You've got 1 foot equals 12 inches. Very, very simple. And this is kimat b'chol Torah kula. But there's a Mishnah in Kalim where you have a very strange machlokes tanoim. Reb Meir says that I was just reading the lashon of the Mishnah, kol ha'amos hoyu beinanus, which means that all amos are, even in the Beit Hamikdash, are normal. That is 6 tefachim. Chutz, he carries on, there are a couple of exceptions. One is the Mizbeach HaZahav, and if you look inside, here you have a drawing of a sketch of the Beit Hamikdash. This is the Azorah. You've got the outer Mizbeach. Then when you come into the Heichel, which in these parshas that we're reading at the moment is referred to in the Torah as Ohel Moed, in there, the first thing that you come to is the Heichel, before you come into Kodesh Kedoshim. And in the Heichel, you have the Shulchan, you have the Menorah, and you have Mizbeach HaZahav, contrasting that with the Mizbeach outside. And Reb Meir says that all Amos are normal, an Amma equals 6 Tefachim. The two exceptions are the Mizbeach HaZahav, which is inside the Heichel, and the other thing which is exceptional, which is the kronos, the corners of the Mizbeach HaChitzon, and also which sort of at the edges of the Mizbeach HaChitzon, and also this Sovev and the Yesod, which also stick out. We won't really need to deal with them. We'll keep it simple. Let's just refer to the Kronos and the Mizbeach HaZahav. According to Reb Meir, those are strange amos. They're not normal. It's like saying those are feet which are only 10 inches. All right. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, if you count the Mishnah, he says no. The building, the binyan of the Beit Hamikdash, this is the Azorah, for example, the outer walls of the Azorah, are normal, i.e. amas of 6 tvachim, but all the kelim, yes, all the kelim, not only Mizbeach HaZahav, but the menorah and the shulchan and all the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, they're all amas of 5 tvachim. And of course, he agrees that the corners on the Mizbeach are also 5 tvachim. Now, this is very, very strange. What's so strange is that you're changing what an amma means. Why? And it gets really difficult when you refer to the Mizbeach, because part of the Mizbeach, where the measurements are in amas, of course, are amas of 6 tvachim. That's most of the Mizbeach. But when you come to the Kronos, those amas are 5 tvachim. Well, you can imagine an architect giving you measurements for a room, and here, up to here is, this is 8 amas, and there, the amas is 6 tvachim. Then another amma or two further up, or the roof, and there amas of 5 tvachim. This is extremely strange, and it needs some sort of hesper. All right. Now let's go back to our heichal, and in the heichal, as you're going, you're in the Azorah, you then go up the steps into the Zinulam, then you come into the heichal proper. All right, as we refer to that, we know that these are the special kelim, menorah, shulchan, and Mizbeach HaZahav over there. Keep going, yeah. Go further into the heichal, past the heichal, and you come into. It's labeled here as Dviyah. It's another name for the Kodesh Kedoshim. Inside the Kodesh Kedoshim, there's only one keli, and that is the Oren. Yes. Now, there's a bit of a problem here because the Gemara in Megillah, it's in Megillah Yud, just Yud Dalet, it's Yud Omid Beis. The Gemara says that we have a Kabbalah from Moshe Rabbeinu that the Oren was 10 amas away. If you go to the side of the Oren and you measure from the side of the Oren to its corresponding wall, then that distance is 10 amas, and that goes for all 4 walls. Right. So you've got the Oren, and then to the nearest wall is perpendicular, right angle, is 10 amas there, 10 amas there, 10 amas there, and 10 amas there. Fine. The only trouble is that the Oren only, that the Kodesh Kedoshim only occupied a space of 20 amas by 20 amas. It's a square. The Dviyah, the Kodesh Kedoshim, is 20 amas by 20 amas. Now, how can you have something which is 10 amas from each side, but that's already 20 amas? So how can you have something which is 10 amas from each side and in the space of 20 by 20? So the Gemara asks the kasha, and the Gemara says, good kasha, but b'neis hoy omed, the Oren, you're right, there isn't really enough space for the Oren, and the only thing which would actually be exactly 10 amas from each side is a pinhead, just one nekuda katana. But and the Oren was not a nekuda katana. The Oren occupied, we've recently lined, it's 2.5 amas long, 1.5 amas wide, 1.5 amas tall. So it's got gezinter measurements. It's not just a pinhead, yeah. So it says, the Gemara says, yes, you're right, but the Oren was, it didn't occupy any space at all. The Lashon of the Gemara is Eino Min HaMidah. So, how does this work? So the Gemara says, yeah, it's an ace, yeah. Well, fine, if it's an ace, there's no problem. Yes, you can have Nisim, especially in the Kodesh Kedoshim. I'd expect Nisim, fine. But a Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't want to do Nisim. He wants the world to run normally. So when we need an ace, for example, Kriyas Yamsuf or Yitzis and so on. At certain times we needed a Nisim. Okay. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is not happy to do Nisim. He doesn't want to interfere with Teva, with nature. But if it's necessary, a Nisim occur. But what's the point of this Nes? Who sees this? First of all, who needs it? Who sees it? You weren't allowed the Kodesh Kedoshim. Who goes into the Kodesh Kedoshim? The Kohen Gadol, on one day of the year, Yom Kippur, and so he'll see, at maximum he'll see that Nes. But what is he needed for? Nobody else sees it. One person, one time in the year, and if it wasn't b'neis hoya omedu, if it did actually occupy space, and it would it make any difference? No. So that really does need an explanation. Okay. Then there's just a couple of more points here, which I want to just draw your attention to. There's a Mishnah in Ovos, which it's in Ovos, Mishnah Perik Hey Mishnah Hey, that it says that when Klal Yisrael went to the Beit Hamikdash, then they were really very squashed. They were omdim tzefufim. There was very difficult to find enough space for everybody to come in. So when they came in, omdim tzefufim, it was everybody squashed because there's hardly any space. But when they heard the Shema Mefurish from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, then they were omdim tzefufim, and then mishtachavim merachim, and then when they lay down on the floor, bowing down, and occupying much more space than just their feet, where the shoes are, they're mishtachvim revachim. No problem. Plenty of space. So I haven't got a kasha on that, but I'm just pointing out that it is interesting. Yeah. Okay. The last point, which I want to just draw your attention to, this is not a kasha. There's a Mishnah, Gemara in Yuma. It's in Yuma, I think, Kaval from Beis and Erevin, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. But Afal Pish, we're talking now about the top of the Mizbeach. All right, as you can see here, top of the Mizbeach. This is the outer Mizbeach, of course. There were various marochas there. We had to bring wood to burn the emurim, which we discussed before. But the Gemara says there's an interesting thing that took place on top of the Mizbeach. And that is that there was an Eish Yoredis Min HaShamayim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent down, Mishamayim, a fire that came down and helped burn korbanos on top of the Mizbeach. So the Gemara discusses, well, if you've got this miraculous fire, Mishamayim, so why do we need to bring wood, gizu eitzim, and make barochas? There's an Eish Min HaShamayim. So the Gemara says, yeah, fine, but afal pisha Eish Yoredis Min HaShamayim, mitzvah lahavi min ha'hedget. We also have to contribute. If you contribute and we make our fire, then Shas HaKosher, when things were going well, an Eish came down in the Shemayim. All right. Now, the Eish seems to play an important part in Torah Bichlal. The Torah itself was given how? It was given as an Eish Shchora on a background of Eish Levana, a black fire on a white fire, and that's how at Har Sinai we received the Torah. You find a number of times when HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvodu v'atzmo intervenes in the affairs of man. Then what happens? He, for example, Nodav Avihu, an Eish came down and burnt them, killed them. Korach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought an Eish down and killed them. Eliyahu Bahar Carmel, how did he show that Nevi Habal was Sheker and he was Emes? Again, an Eish came in Shemayim. There seems to be that when a Kodesh Baruch Hu b'chvodo v'atzmo is involved, there is Eish. Eish seems to appear. Why and what's the significance of this Eish? So those are the 6 points or 6 questions. I'll go over them. I mean, just we'll go over them again in a second. But I just wanted to. Shall I just put this on here? These are the questions. Firstly, there's no time passing on top of the Mizbeach. Ein lina b'rosh show Mizbeach. That was question number 1. Question number 2 is Ein mukdam u'mucha b'Torah. Question number 3 was the kelim are normally 6 tefachim, but in the Beis Hamikdash, certain kelim and the corners of the Mizbeach as a chitzon were amos of 5 tefachim, smaller amos apparently. The 4th point we had, the Oren occupied no space. The 5th point we've just had, that they, when Klal Yisrael were in the Beis Hamikdash, they were omdim tzvufim, mishtachavim, mevachim. When they mishtachaveh, they had more space. And the last point is, what is the significance of Eish? Okay, now we will try and answer all those questions, but before we do, we need to explain some basic principles of Einstein's theory of relativity, which for the last 100 years has basically been accepted by all scientists throughout the world. Obviously, there have been advances beyond that, which is quantum and string theory and so on, but relativity, in essence, has been accepted by the world for the last 100 years. So we'll treat it with a little bit of derech eretz. Now, I'm going to explain some basic relativity. Those of you who are physicists and so on, please don't be insulted. That's the first point. And I also want to just mention that although there's a couple of formulae here, and a lot of people, when it comes to mathematics, they get very nervous, all right, and they freeze up. But this is very simple, number 1. And number 2 is, if you don't follow the formula exactly, it doesn't matter. We'll just take the result of the formula. The formula just shows how we get certain things. But if you don't follow the formula, it really doesn't matter. Now, let me explain this sort of basic relativity with the usual example that is given. We've got 2 babies, twins. They've just been born at exactly the same moment. And we take one baby, and we put him on a rocket ship, and he goes and travels through space. It's a bit of a cruel experiment. It's a thought experiment, of course. And he will be there on this rocket ship for many, many years. The twin down here on Earth is not going anywhere. But eventually they come back together again when the twin on Earth is 80 years old. An example. Now, what about the twin that's been on the rocket ship? Yes? Well, you say, he's also 80 years old. They were born at the same time, so he's also 80 years old. Well, that's basically correct, as long as his speed, the twin on the rocket ship, as long as the rocket ship is not traveling at an enormously powerful speed, velocity. Let me look at the formula a moment, yes? So I've got here TA. TA is the actual time or absolute time on the rocket. This is to find out what time has passed for the twin on the rocket ship, right? That's what we're going to try and find out, the absolute time for the twin on the rocket ship. It equals TR, that is the relative time, i.e. the twin on the Earth, how much time has passed for him, multiplied by 1 minus v squared over c squared. So the, as I've said here, TA is actual time, TR is the relative time, v is his velocity, that's how fast the rocket ship is going, and c is the speed of light. Now, the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers a second. Yeah, which is quite a speed. It's 186,000 miles per second. It's about 670 million miles an hour. Very, very fast. So normally, there's no question. Everybody says, I don't care where you've been or what you've been doing, or did you take a flight. Your time, my watch and your watch, exactly the same. Fine. And that it works. Why? Because if you just go through the formula, the actual time for one twin, the relative time for the other, 1 minus v is his speed, over c. C is the speed of light. Now, any speed will be tiny compared with the speed of light. And when you square it, it becomes even smaller. So it's 1 minus 0.1. So it's nothing. So it's TA equals TR into the square root of 1. Well, the square root of 1 is 1. So TA equals TR. That's very straightforward, and that's our experience of life. And therefore, if you say to anybody, we're going to synchronize our watches. We're going to make sure that watches are reading the same time, and I'll see you in a month's time. It doesn't matter what the other person's been doing. The time will be the same, whatever he's doing. Yeah, but what happens if he actually travels at not just 20,000 miles an hour or 50,000 miles an hour, but let's say at half the speed of light, right? That means that he's traveling at 93,000 miles a second, which is a fantastic speed. Okay. Now, the arithmetic then comes out as follows. 1 minus, now we want to find out the actual time that will be on the rocket ship. So what we do is, we look at what's his velocity. His velocity is half the speed of light. All right? That's half c. Half c over c is half c. When you square that, you get 3/4 of the speed of light. Yeah? 1 minus 3/4 of the speed of light is 1/4 of the speed of light. Right? Now, TA equals TR, the square root of that. The square root of 3/4 is 0.866. Well, as I say, don't worry too much. I'll just run through that very quickly again. If he's traveling at half the speed of light, half c over c is a half. If you square that, that's 1/4. 1 minus 1/4 is 3/4. The square root of 3/4 is the square root of 3 over 2, which is 0.866. All right? And 1 minus that is 0.866, which means that the actual time that will pass for the twin on the rocket ship is only 86.6% of the time that will have passed on Earth. So let's take an example that it was 100 years. So the twin on Earth is 100 years. The twin that comes back is only 86 years. Right? Not only is his time has slowed down, but the clock on the rocket ship will have slowed down, and everything in the rocket ship and all the biological, if there are animals on the ship, everything will only the amount of time which will pass will only be 86.6% of the time on Earth. Is it clear, do you think? Mzala. Okay. Tefast Baglit Mash Martin. Yeah, okay. Now, yeah, okay. What is more interesting is, so what do we see? We see that the faster you are traveling, if it really, really exceptionally fast, this is the boundaries of what can happen physically. The faster you're going in these amazing speeds, the slower will be time. Now, let's take this formula and let him actually travel at the speed of light. All right? So then you've got v is the same as c. So that's 1. Yeah? If v is the same as c, it's c over c. That's 1. The square of 1 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. So the actual amount of time which will have passed for the twin on the rocket ship is 0. No time at all. So what happens then is when he comes back to Earth, if he's been traveling at the speed of light, his twin will be 100 years old, and back on Earth, he hasn't gone anywhere, and the twin on the rocket ship will be a newborn baby. He will be the age of a baby that's just been born, because no time will have passed. What is perhaps more interesting is let's v be greater than c. Let him travel at faster than the speed of light. Okay. If you square it, that's more than 1. 1 minus a number more than 1 is a minus number. What's the square root of a minus number? It doesn't exist. In mathematics and physics, they call it I. The square root of minus 1 is I. What does I mean? In English you say it's imaginary. It doesn't exist. Because minus 1 times minus 1 is plus 1. Plus 1 times plus 1 is plus 1. So what number can you have which the square root of it is minus? It can't exist. Because every minus is a plus. Every square is a positive. And if you square root, that means what number multiplied by itself will give you 1. It's either minus 1 times minus 1 is 1, plus 1 times plus 1 is 1. So how do you get the square root? What negative number of minus 1 can you have to get the result? The answer is it doesn't exist. But we call it imaginary. And it's very useful in mathematics and in physics and electricity. We pretend it exists, and it works in formulae, but it doesn't really in the real world it doesn't exist. But don't worry about it, as I say, if mathematics formulas don't bother you, don't worry about it. Because all we need is that to see that you cannot travel at the speed of light. That's an impossibility. In nature you cannot travel. Anything physical cannot travel at the speed of light. That is the very gvul, the boundary of the universe. You can go very, very fast speeds. Atomic particles go very fast speeds, but nothing can travel at the speed of light. If it would, no time would pass, and if you went more than the speed of light, theoretically, the whole musag of time, zman, the whole concept of time, wouldn't exist. All right. So we see that but that is already the gvul of teva. So when you get to speeds which are towards the gvul of teva, time slows down, and if it goes really, really the gvul, beyond the gvul, then the whole musag of time doesn't exist. That's when it comes to time. All right. The same thing, you have the same formula for volume. I've written it just below the line there. It's exactly the same formula. The faster you are going, the smaller the object becomes. And if you're traveling again, the same sort of calculation, half the speed of light will mean that you've shrunk, you're smaller, occupied less space. In our example before, would be 86%. If it was 100 square meters before, it would only be 86 if it's traveling at the speed. If it travels at the speed of light, it occupies no space. And if it's more than the speed of light, then the whole concept of space doesn't mean anything. Now, if we've got this, obviously this is just some basic concept of relativity. It seems very, very strange, but it is a fact. It's been demonstrated by endless experiments, and the world uses this. But just remember that when you get towards the gvul of teva, time slows down. It can actually even disappear if you're going fast enough, and the volume, the space, also slows down. Okay. Now, so that is some basic. As I said, we just need the result. Don't worry about how we got there. The formula, if you're worried about it, doesn't matter. This is a fact. When you get towards the gvul of teva, time slows down. In fact, eventually could become zero if you traveled at the speed of light, and volume shrinks. Okay. Now let's go back to our 6 questions, and we're going to not exactly answer the questions, but we'll have some sort of understanding of maybe why we have these strange questions occurring. Not in complete order, go to question 2. Yes? Ein mukdam u'mucha b'Torah. Yeah, there's no order in the Torah. And we said this is a bit strange, why there should not be an order. But the answer, now here we are, this is the questions, now let's go to the answers. These are answers or parallels. Yeah. The Zohar says, I've given the reference there, Ched Gimel, page on Gimel. The Zohar says that Kudsha Bricha Udaraisa Chadahi, that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we need to understand this, of course, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah are one. What does that mean? It means that the Torah, the Torah that we have in our world, which we've got words and letters and so on, these are physical manifestations. This is a physical understanding in our world of pure kedusha. The Shekhinah is pure kedusha. There's nothing physical at all. But the Torah in our world is let's say as a moshel. Imagine you have an enormous iceberg, in the ocean, an iceberg. It's 1 million tons, and a little bit is sticking out. So you see, I see the iceberg. No, you're seeing epis of that. The Torah is our epis. We're physical beings, but there's an infinite kuchabrichu which produces our Torah. The Zohar says it. Kuchabrichu d'oraisa chadahi. Now, is there time to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Clearly not, because we say in the Yigdal, yes, from the Rambam, Nimtzah ve'ein eisel mitziuso. But he doesn't have any time. There's no time to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Time is only in our physical world. So the Torah does not have. It's a representation. It represents the kedusha of the Ribono Shel Olam, based on the Zohar, and therefore there's no time. Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no time. So the Torah has no time. Okay, so since the Torah Sof Kol Sof is for us, our Torah, so the vast majority, Dibra Torah Koloshim B'nei Odom, so we can understand, at least on a pshat level. But where you have sveikus of where you have doubt where something should be, and maybe the thing written before happened afterwards. I'll give the example with Israel. There's not a question. Of course, that's only natural that this should be the case. You're not limited to time because this is a representation of Kaviyachol of the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is not limited to a Seder. It's only Seder. Seder, if you remember the formula that we had, that works out until you get to the Gevul of Teva. But once you get beyond that, there is no time. Okay. So that is a little bit of understanding maybe of question 2. question 3, we said it's very strange for Kalim, according to Rabbi Yehuda, all the Kalim in the Beis Hamikdash will have amas of 5 tefachim. They shrunk. Strange, yeah. And Rabbi Yehuda says, you're right on the corners of the Mizbeach, and you're right for the Mizbeach HaZahav, but the others, no, all the other Kalim, presumably including the menorah and the shulchan, no, they were normal amas. What's the machlokus here? Yeah. The answer is that in the Beis Hamikdash we know that this is Asuli Mikdash v'Shechanti b'Salchom. In the Beis Hamikdash, which is the Mokum HaShechina. So we are now in the Gevul of Kedusha of our world. We have Kedusha, Afil Echot, Shalomed, Torah, Shechina, Sheruya, Olov, yeah, Asara make even a greater Shechina, but the Beis Hamikdash is the most powerful Shechina that we have in our world. So the question, the Machlokes, Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, is the shrinking of the volume of the Kelim, getting smaller, the size is getting smaller. That would happen fine, in the same way as in the physical world. If you're going at a speed approaching the speed of light, everything will shrink. So the question is, at what stage is the Kedusha of the Kelim at the Gevul of Kedusha of our world? Yeah. So Rabbi Yehuda said all the Kelim in the Beis Hamikdash, they were all in the presence of the Shekhinah, they all were beyond the Gevul of Kedusha of our world. And therefore you have it goes together with that, a manifestation of that things, the Kelim shrunk. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir says, no, not all of them, no. The Mizbeach HaZahav, or Mizbeach HaKetoris, that, but all the other Kelim still were normal Kelim. They didn't come to a Gevul of Kedusha which is beyond our world, but the top of the Mizbeach HaZahav, and the Mizbeach and the corners of the Mizbeach HaChitzon, there, I agree, we are at the end of beyond normal Kedusha of our world, and then already the sizes shrink. Okay, so let's just take that a little bit further, because let's go on to the next question, and then this question we just had now will become clearer. The Oren, yeah? So we said the Oren is Einam in a Midah. It occupied no space. And we had a question. I mean, why should it not occupy space? I mean, the Gemara says it doesn't make sense, but it's an ace. Okay, why should a Kodesh Baruch Hu make an ace? The answer is that the Oren was the mamish, the mokum, the greatest mokum of Shechina, of Kedusha, in our world. Between the Kruvim, which were on top of the Oren, the Shechina spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is mamish the mokum, that is a Shechina, Kaviyachal. If that's the case, then there's no time there, and there's no space. The Oren could not have space. It's all relativity. Relative to itself, yeah, it has. But relative to the world around, it doesn't have space. It's the same way as, all right, so it means that you see that when the Kalim, when the very Kodesh Kalim, depending on which Tana you learn, like, the very Kodesh Dika Kalim, they will shrink because they are already going to a degree of Kedusha which is really beyond our world. It's very close to the Gevul of Kedusha. When you come to the Oren, which is the Shechina, there's no space. And you see, what's fascinating is exactly parallel is the time as well. It's Gemara Chagiga, which says that the Olei Regolim, when they came to Yerushalayim, they used to take out the lechem upon him, which had been put in the previous week. What was the state of lechem upon him? On Friday they baked lechem upon him, the 12 challahs. On Shabbos they took away the old challahs, put 12 new ones, and then next week they did the same thing. Next week these challahs had been there since Shabbos. The next Shabbos they were taken away, and new challahs were put on. Now, when the Olei Regolim would come up over Yantif, so one of the very nice things that was shown to Klal Yisrael, Re'ei chibaschem lefnei hamokom. You see how the Rebbeinu Shalom loves you. He's doing nisim all the time. Look at this lechem upon him. The lechem upon him, which is just taken out, how long had it been there for? It was there for a week, and in fact it had been baked 8 days ago, because Friday they baked it. Last Shabbos they put this lechem upon him on. Now this lechem upon him has been taken out today, a week later, and you saw the steam rising, like when you take fresh bread out of the oven. The steam is still rising. It's fresh for the week. He said, "You see the Kodesh Baruch Hu is doing this for you." Fine. Okay, and the Shulchan also, certainly according to Rabbi Yehuda, was something towards the Gvul of Teva, Gvul of Kedusha. So, in the same way as it shrunk a bit, the size shrunk a bit, so the Zman shrunk a bit as well. It was 7 days? No, it either was only a few minutes. But the parallel now with the Oren is fantastic, because we had Bisan and Bishalach when the Kodesh Baruch there was a tzinsenis. You should take a tzinsenis mon. The Kodesh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, take a tzinsenis mon and put it in the Oren. And Rashi explains what are we doing? He says like this: 900 years later, towards the end of Bais Rishon, there's going to be a time where Yiddishkeit will be very schwach, and Shmir Shabbos will be not what it should be. And the people would say, look, they said to Yirmiyahu, what do you want from us? We've got to eat. It's Pikuach Nefesh. If we don't work on Shabbos, we'll have nothing to eat. So what did he do? He took out the Sinsenis Mon, which is food, and said, look, if you behave correctly, Klapi Shmaya, towards a Kodesh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can make the mon come down min hashamayim. You could have lechem min hashamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will provide you. Okay. Now, that's fine. But where was the mon kept? It was kept in the Oren, which is a very strange place. First of all, it's a strange place to keep it, because one of the things there is the Sefer Torah, and we normally try and keep food away from the Sefer Torah. But okay. But how do you keep something fresh for 900 years? To keep something fresh for 7 days, okay. Yeah, I can understand if time is slowing down. But 900 years, there's no refrigerator. There's no way you can keep it fresh. There's only one way you can keep it fresh. What makes food go stale, that goes bad? The time passes. It's old. It's past its sell-by date. So the only way the mon could be kept fresh is to be put a place where there is no zman. Yeah, and the Oren had no zman. It had no space. It had no zman. They go together. Why? Because the Shekhinah is there. So there is no space and there is no zman. It's all. I can't explain why, but this you see. Yeah. I just want to go a little bit further on this. There's many interesting points just on this. Let's look a little bit at this Oren. We've seen that it's quite an interesting place. No zman, no space. But where is this coming from? Yeah, what I understand the Shekhinah speaks there. So there's a midrash Ne'elam. It's a midrash which is on the style of the Rabbi Shimon Yochai in the Zohar. The midrash Ne'elam addresses an interesting question. We know that Adam Harishon and Chava, after the Chet of Adam Harishon and Chava, Nebuch, they were thrown out of Gan Eden. Okay. Now, people ask the question, one second. We today, we have satellites and so on. We've mapped the whole world. We've seen the whole world. Yeah, you can have a Google map. You can see everything. Yeah, all over the world. Where's Gan Eden? Where is it? So the simple pshat is that Gan Eden's a very ruchnius thing. It's a different dimension. It's not physical as we know it. Fine. The Midrash Ne'elam says that there is an entrance to Gan Eden. Where is the entrance? When they were Muguroshim, they were thrown out of Gan Eden, besides the Harav HaMesapeches, what was there at the gate to Gan Eden? The Kruvim. The only time you find in Torah Kruvim is there, at the Pesach of Gan Eden, and a Rosh Hashanah of the Aron, Rosh Hashanah Aron, is the Kruvim, Ishalochiv. The Midrash Ne'elam, which is somewhat Kabbalistic, says that the entrance to Gan Eden is those Kruvim. And whoever went in that? It says on the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, Ish al Yovo Ish, when Bavo into the Kodesh Kodashim, when the Kohen Gadol, if he was the Ish Kodesh that he should be, the Ish Mura Mikola Am, Mamash, completely Kodesh, he would enter Gan Eden. He could enter Gan Eden. And remember, Gan Eden, and this is the connection, this Gan Eden was a place where there was no time and no space. What's the right of the Dover? Adam HaRishon, had he not done the Chet, he would have lived forever. There was no time. The Chazal say that he would roa misofa olam at sofa. There's no space. You could see a billion light years away. There's no space. There was no space, no time. That was the matzav of Gan. Maral says this. That was the matzav of Gan Eden before they were thrown out. When the Kohen Gadol, if he was the Ish Kodesh that he should be, he could enter temporarily bein these Kruvim. That's where they got thrown out through the Kruvim. He went back in to the Kruvim, and he had HaKadosh Baruch Hu Misaleches B'toch Hagan, and he was with the Shechina, and he would daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Klal Yisrael and so on. You can understand the power of those tefillahs of the Kohen Gadol when the Shechina is there. He's entered the Mokam HaShechina. You understand also why in Ba'as Sheni particularly, for example, where the Kohanim Gedolim were Rishonim, many of them, and they bought the Kahuna, they died. They died straight away. You can't come into contact with the Shechina. And even at Har Sinai, when Yisrael were Kodesh, but after two of the Dibros, they said that, at the end of Parashas Yisrael, they said, look, Moshe Rabbeinu, you carry, you hear the rest of the tzivui from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we'll no more. You can't be with the Shechina; it's too much. And they died, and they had to pull them out. Nebuch, they goofed to pull them out. But you see that the Oron, which didn't take up space, didn't take up time, it makes sense. It actually fits in beautifully. Okay. One other question that we asked, and that is that there were omdim, the Mishnah Novus, omdim tzefufim mishtachavim revochim, which we said is a bit interesting, seems strange, and the answer is similarly. How does this work? Because even Nissim have a logic. There's a logic to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He created logic, and everything works within Seichel. When were they mishtachaveh? We all know from Yom Kippur davening, yes. Kishikol ha'am shomim is a shem ha'mafur sheyos mipi kohen gadol hayu mishtachavim ve'om. Yeah, they're mishtachaveh. Now the Gemara says in Megillah Yudalad Amud Beis. And maybe we should feel that we haven't got the Beis Hamikdash, so people feel, what am I missing? So I can't go to the Beis Hamikdash. Like, so what? You don't realize, the Gemara says that the Beis Hamikdash was a place where not the greatest tzaddik, just a good person, the Shomer Torah Mitzvahs, the Yirei Shemayim, could go there, and he could become a Novi. The Gemara says there were Kiflayim Kiyotzi Yudalim Beis. There were Kiflayim Kiyotzi Mitzrayim Nevi'im. So the Gemara says, well, how come we've only got 48 Nevi'im? That which we needed for future Doros, the various Nevi'im which gave Nevuah for the future, which is messages there we needed. But the average person, he's an Ovi for himself. But he's an Ovi, yeah? And even people who weren't on that Madrega, but they would still experience Ruach HaKodesh. Simchas Beis HaShoeva. What were they? It wasn't just pouring water. They were Shoev Ruach HaKodesh. Gemara Yedua. So this is the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash when they heard the Shem HaMafurish from Kohen Gadol. So it all squashed. We haven't got space, but they became with kedusha, like we saw with the Kalim, that it shrunk. They didn't need so much space. This happens automatically, and of course they're Mamela. There's space. Mishtachavim. They call them Shem HaMafurish Mishtachavim. Yeah, when the Mishtachavim, that was Revachim already. Okay, now we're coming towards the end, but there's another chelek we haven't answered. There's two questions we haven't answered, and number one is, what was the importance of Eish? And the other question was, what about this top of the Mizbeach, which does seem very strange, the corners of the Mizbeach. Now, there's one other part. Let's go back to our relativity, the theory, and there's another a small part of the relativity theory, which is that has produced the formula, which is the most famous formula in the world, and I think everybody knows the formula. The formula is. So I'll tell you, maybe just before I go on to this, I'll just sum up again. The Sakem, what we had, yes. So we asked the answers, or the parallels we had. Why is the Torah not in a right Seder? Because the Torah is a representation of the Shechina, Nimtzor ve'ein Esav Mitzio. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu created time, but He Himself doesn't have time. We say Ki Sheishes. It doesn't say Ki Bush Sheishes Yomim Masashim Masashim V'Haaretz. It's Sheishes Yomim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created time. He's not within time. He created time. So for Him, there's no such thing as time. And the Torah is the representation of, in our world, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore time, Seder, time, doesn't exist. The second question we had, that's question number 3, how come certain Kalim shrunk? And the answer is that these Kalim have such Kedusha to them that Mamela they shrink. They don't occupy so much space. Then we said, what about the Aron? Yes. And also didn't occupy so much space, and therefore also, not only was it shrink, but the Shulchan, for example, time passed slower. The Lechem upon him could stay fresh for a whole week. We asked about the Aron. Why make a nace is einem in a midah? The answer is, it's a natural thing. Yeah, it's a perfectly natural thing. The Shechin is there completely, so of course there's no space. Ein lo demus haguf, ein guf. Nimtzor ve'ein eis, ein lo guf. Yeah. So there's no space at all. And as we pointed out, that also that the lechem upon him, you saw that could stay fresh on the shulchan, but the mon, which needed to stay fresh for 900 years, the only place you could put it was in the Aron. That's why I went in the Aron. We also pointed out that the Aron itself was, as the Maharal points out, that this is really the entrance to Gan Eden and Kruvim. It's the only time we have Kruvim. Those are the same Kruvim. And the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur would come in there, and that would be a place, if he was Kodesh, sufficiently Kodesh, and he was in Gan Eden Shomato, where Adam Rishon, he would have lived forever. Time would be nothing. And he could see Misofa Olam Matzofo. Space was nothing either. Could see the whole world. And the last point we had was, how does it work that they owned themselves Mishtachim Mevachim? As we pointed out, when they heard the Shem HaMafurish, they became Bali Ruach HaKodesh or Nevi'im, whatever. But again, there's they could shrink. They're beyond. They're at the gevul kaviyachol of the physical world, at the gevul of the ruchnius world. All right. Now, so be a few more minutes to finish off. There's another element of relativity which I want to discuss now, which we're going to hopefully answer the two questions about the importance of Aish and the corners of the top of Mizbech. All right. Now, the formula, as I say, which everybody knows, this is one formula. If you know any formula, you know this one. And E equals mc squared. You even have T-shirts with this on it. What is E, and what is M, and what is C? So E equals energy. M is mass, choma, and C, as we had before, is the speed of light. Now, we all know that matter can be converted into energy. Yes, very simple. I take a chatichas eitz, take a log, a wood, and put it in a fire, and that becomes energy. Matter becomes energy. With the atomic bomb, every atom, within every atom, there is enormous power, enormous energy. But we don't see it. Why? Because, I'll just give a quick mashal. If you have, there's a game that people play, you have a rope, a chevel, and you have, I pull my side, he pulls his side, and if we're the same strength, nothing happens. It stays. Because if we're exactly the same strength. Now, if somebody comes along and cuts the rope, I go flying my end, he goes flying his end. And imagine not just one person, but let's say 500 people pulling this way, 500 people pulling that way. Nothing moves. You cut that rope, wow. That's how they split the atom. That's where they get the energy from, splitting the atom. So material contains energy. Mass, choma and so on, is frozen energy, kaviyachol. It's frozen. And the energy is there, but you can release it that's the atomic bomb. They can split the atom. They call it splitting the atom. That's cutting the rope. Right. It's a dangerous thing to be nearby, and if it's an atomic explosion. But that sets off a reaction, because when you split this rope, and these people go flying, that cuts that rope, and so it goes on. Right. So energy mass is frozen energy, and the formula for it is that energy is what? If you've got mass multiplied by the square root, the square of speed of light, you have energy. That's how. So really, every piece of material has fantastic energy in it, but we don't split atoms, and therefore we don't see it. But the matter is just frozen energy. Now, I'm just going to quote a source. The BBC did a documentary. The famous BBC of England, in BBC publications in 1977. They came to the conclusion, based on the top nuclear scientists and so on, that all energy is a form of fire. I think we'll just have to, as I said, I'll give you the exact reference. It's BBC Publications, Key to the Universe. It was edited by Nigel Calder. It's page 65. It's 1977, page 65. Right. But the maskana is that all energy is a form of fire. Fire, of course, we know is energy, but all energy, there's different types of energy. There's kinetic energy, there's nuclear energy, but it's all a form of fire. Now, and in fact, in the same book, the suggestion by various nuclear scientists is that the universe may have originally been formed from energy, and you've got matter and antimatter. Those people, don't worry if you don't know what I'm talking about, but that's not important. But if we take this, then things become very interesting, because imagine that you're privileged to observe creation. So before the Bria, what have you got? Only the Rabban Shalom. There's nothing else. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mitzamtzem, those who know a little bit of Kabbalah, is Mitzamtzem, and Tzimtzum, until you come to our world. So you are dealing with nothing physical in any way, and the world would be very mistaber to say that to go from pure ruach, I mean, you can't describe a Kadosh Baruch Hu as a ruach, we can't describe a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but after all the various tzimtzumim, you come to our world, what have we got? But we still haven't got, until you come to our world, which is mamish, physical, you're still not a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but you're dealing with olomas which are not physical. But to get to the physical world, it would be very mistaber that Kadosh Baruch Hu would take a lower tzimtzum, but it's ruchnius still, ruach, ruchnius. You'd create first energy, and then with the energy would become matter. Again, you've got pure ruach, whatever that is, before the physical world. Energy, which is physical, that's in the physical world still, but you can't touch it. Yeah, and then you have from the energy, you produce matter. And that is the suggestion of the scientists of how the world started off, the Big Bang, and this actually is what Chazal say. And I'll show you the first 4 letters of the Torah. Yeah? We're gracious. Now what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He is bara, our Sefer Torah, the Gaon and the Ramban and so on, all point out, our Sefer Torah is Bereshis, Bara, Elokim, and stop after all those, But there are many other ways, because the Torah contains, the Gaon says in Safra Tziniuso that all information, all sciences, everything is in the Torah. And one of the things that are there, that we don't see, is you don't necessarily stop after Bereshis. You can stop after Bora Eish. And then there are, in fact, Chevelle in the Ramban, there's a parish on the Ramban, brings that in Constantinople there's a Sefer Torah like that, with all different stops. Anyway, the first 4 letters of the Torah are Bora Eish. And with that, Shemayim Voretz. But first of all, he created energy, and that energy he made into matter. We can't do that, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do it. That's our Yesh Me'ayin. The Yesh, what's the Ayin? The Ayin is nothing material, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu created first energy, Eish, and with that he created Shemayim Voretz. Right. Now, if this is correct, that and the Bereshis from our point of view is our first contact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Bereshis. That's before that we have no contact. The Bereshis, we have a world, a Bora Eish. Then you understand why, if this is correct, so often when HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly sort of links with us in some way, interfaces, you say in English, this is contacts, it's with fire. The biggest thing we ever had was Matan Torah. And what is it? Eish Shechara Leish Levana. As some of the examples I had before, the Yoh Bahar Carmel, the fire, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervened. Korach, Vavihu, all again and again. How does HaKadosh Baruch Hu introduce himself to Moshe Rabbeinu? The Sneh HaBoer, fire. Because this is where the Shekhinah Kavyochel is coming into direct contact with our world. All right. Now, if this is correct, we now have 2 parts of this theory fitting beautifully B'Rosh Hashem Mizbeach. Yeah? We didn't really explain why there's no time of B'Rosh Hashem Mizbeach. But now we maybe have an understanding, because we said there's an Eish Yoredis Min HaShemayim, an Eish, Bora, yes, Eish Yeredus Min Hashemayim, direct contact to the extent that we can think about this. The Kodesh Baruch is not goofed, but there's Shechina. That's what we can talk about. There's a Shechina al Rosh Hashanah's Mizbeach, so tangible, so concrete, so real, that it would burn the Korbanos, burn the Emurim on the Kabbalah Mizbeach. So you understand why now, if the Shechina is there, Kaviyachol, Ein Lina B'Rosh Hashanah's Mizbeach. Can't be any time. Time doesn't pass. The wonderful, one of the reasons that we mourn Bavelis for the Chorban Beis Hamikdash is because with Zman Beis Hamikdash Kayim, a person would, I've done an Aveira, okay, I do Tshuva, I'm not going to be my korban. So if I was like genuine Yirei Shemayim, and I brought my korban, Cohen did all the avodah, then he put it on top. Let's say an ola, put it on top of his back. Yeah, I missed Kriyashma a few times, so I was in Vatlan Asay, and I mischavit does it. So he put this ola on top of the mizbeach, and if I was zocher, the Eish would come down. It's called the mizbeach ola. Yeah, Gavaldi. I'm direct contact with the Rebbeinu Shalom. So of course there's no zman. Now let's have a look at basically the last question, which we hadn't really dealt with, which was the corners of the mizbeach at the top. So although there was a discussion, Rav Meir said not all the kelim had such kedusha that they shrunk in time, but the corners of the mizbeach, yeah, there I agree, and you could of course agree. Everybody agreed with that. Why the corners of the mizbeach? And yeah, because the same place where Ein Lina B'Rosh Hashanah's Mizbeach, because the Shechina was direct there, so the side nearby, they shrunk. The kronos are just outside the area of the Shechina, where when the Shechina is there, no Lina, no time, and outside there it shrinks. Yeah, and everybody agrees with that. And similar to the Kalim outside the Kodesh Kedoshim, inside the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Oren took up no space. Nearby, outside, the Kalim shrunk a bit, the Shulchan with the Lechem upon him. Here as well, there's no time when the Shechina comes directly down, and there is less space of the Kronos, which are near there. So just take the last two questions that just to sum up, the last two questions that we had were, what's so important about the Eish? And the Eish, as we said, is the very Bria, was a conversion of energy into matter, Bora Eish, and with that Shemayim V'Oretz. That's our connection, so shows the direct connection with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and all the various cases, Matan Torah, there's Snei Boer, the Obahar Karmel, v'chulu v'chulu. And therefore, there was no zman on the top of the mizbeach. Everybody agrees with, and that's the halacha. There's one Tana who disagrees. Okay, and that also explains why the kronos, being nearby there, just like being the kelim outside the Kodesh Kedoshim, the kronos, which are close to that place of the Shechina, they shrink. Now, I hope that we've given some insight into all the points that we raised. Some were questions, some were just ha'oros, interesting things to look at. But and I'm not trying to explain anything. All I'm trying to do is to show very fascinating parallels. Yeah, that although there are strange things happening in the Beis Hamikdash, they seem to exactly fit in with relativity. Both of them are the extreme. Relativity only becomes meaningful when you've got fantastic speeds. Yeah, the gvul of teva. Yeah, nothing can travel the speed of light. When you get to the near, and normally it doesn't. Time is time for everybody. It's only when you get close to the gvul of teva. And again, when it comes to us, everything is all these strange, unusual things happen, which exactly parallel. They're also the gevul of kedusha, because that is the ultimate kedusha that you'll have in the Beis Hamikdash, the Shechina b'chvod v'atzma. I'm just showing the interesting parallels. I cannot explain why it is, but you see that there is something there. maybe the Kabbalah can explain it, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it. Thank you very much.